Today, we're diving into the fascinating topic of the Bantu migration. Picture this, it's way back in the day, around the 2nd millennium BCE, and the Bantu people are on the move from their homeland in West Africa. But this isn't just any old journey, it's a massive population shift that's going to change the face of Africa forever. So, these Bantu folks weren't just wandering around for fun, they were bringing some serious skills and tech with them. We're talking about things like farming magic. They knew how to grow crops like pros, thanks to their knowledge of high-yield plants and iron tools. And speaking of iron, they were basically blacksmithing wizards, crafting some top-notch tools and weapons that gave them a real edge. As the Bantu migration swept across the continent, they pretty much took over everywhere except South Africa and the Namibian desert. Can you believe it? And get this, they left behind a linguistic legacy too. There are over 500 languages spoken today that can be traced back to the original Bantu tongue. Talk about leaving your mark. Now, the details of this epic journey are still up for debate among historians. Exactly when it all went down, why they decided to hit the road, and which paths they took, it's all still a bit of a mystery. But one thing's for sure, the Bantu migration was a game changer for Africa. But wait, there's more! Before they even set off on their big adventure, the Bantu were already pretty skilled farmers and craftsmen. Their homeland was in places like modern-day Nigeria and Cameroon, where they were rocking both stone and iron tools to grow crops like millet, sorghum, and rice. And let's not forget their mad skills in animal husbandry, pottery, and trading. These guys were the real deal. As time went on, some Bantu groups started heading east and south, spreading their language and culture as they went. Linguists have actually been able to track their migration by studying the languages spoken along the way. It's like piecing together a massive historical puzzle. And now it's time to delve deeper into the reasons behind the epic Bantu migration and what went down as they spread their influence across Africa. So, picture this, the Bantu people were on the move for a bunch of reasons. They were feeling the squeeze back in their homeland, running low on resources, dealing with overpopulation, and facing off against famine and epidemics. Plus, there was some serious competition going on for the good stuff like land and food. And hey, who doesn't love a bit of adventure, right? As they journeyed, the Bantu peeps didn't just stop at settling in East Africa. Oh no, they kept on trucking southward, founding coastal settlements and spreading their culture like wildfire. It was like a migration marathon, with different waves happening over thousands of years. Now, here's where things get really interesting. The Bantu weren't just aimlessly wandering around. They were on a mission to colonize new lands. And boy, did they bring some cool stuff with them. We're talking iron smelting, pottery making, and top-notch farming skills. They were like the original DIY experts, sharing their knowledge with whoever they met along the way. But it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine. As the Bantu migrated, they had a big impact on the environment too. They needed charcoal for iron smelting, which led to deforestation in some areas. And they introduced new foods like plantain bananas and yams to different regions, changing the culinary landscape forever. As they settled into new areas, the Bantu created villages and built up their own societies, complete with kings and fancy new technologies. But not everyone was down with the Bantu vibe. Some indigenous groups weren't too keen on the whole Bantu takeover situation. The Pygmies and the Sand folks were like, nah, we're good here in the rainforests and deserts thanks. But let's be real, with their iron weapons and warrior skills, the Bantu weren't exactly messing around. They pretty much had the upper hand wherever they went, and local peeps were like, alright, you guys can lead the way. Sure, there were some holdouts, but for the most part, the Bantu migration was a game changer for Africa. So, as the Bantu continued their migration journey, they didn't just bring their fancy iron tools and farming skills. Oh no, they also spread their language like wildfire. Imagine chatting with someone from hundreds of miles away, but still being able to understand each other because you share the same Bantu roots. Crazy, right? And let's talk about those iron tools for a second. I mean, they weren't just handy for farming, they also made the Bantu pretty formidable when it came to defending their turf. With their iron weapons, they were like the Avengers of ancient Africa, ready to take on anyone who stood in their way. But it wasn't all about conquest and domination. The Bantu were also all about sharing their knowledge and learning from the locals they met along the way. Like, they picked up some cool fishing techniques and farming tricks that had been perfected over generations. It was like a cultural exchange program on steroids. Now, you might be wondering, what about the folks who weren't too thrilled about the Bantu invasion? Well, some groups decided to retreat to more remote areas, like the rainforests and deserts, where they could live life on their own terms. It was kind of like hitting the peace out button and going off the grid. But despite the resistance, the Bantu migration kept on rolling, leaving a trail of linguistic, cultural, and technological awesomeness in its wake. And as they settled into their new homes, they brought even more innovation and progress to the table, building up their communities and forging new alliances. With their newfound knowledge of iron smelting and farming techniques, the Bantu turned their villages into bustling hubs of activity. They were like the Silicon Valley of ancient Africa, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And let's not forget about the language situation. With the Bantu spreading their linguistic roots far and wide, it was like a linguistic explosion, with new dialects popping up left and right. But despite the linguistic diversity, there was still this sense of unity among the Bantu people. They were all in this together, building something bigger than themselves. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. As the Bantu continued to expand their influence, they came into contact with other groups who weren't too keen on their whole colonization vibe. Some folks were like, "Hey, we were doing just fine before you showed up," and tensions started to simmer. But through it all, the Bantu kept on thriving, adapting to their new surroundings and leaving their mark on the continent. And as they continued to grow and evolve, they paved the way for a new era of African civilization, one that would shape the course of history for centuries to come.